Good evening, everyone. Coming to you live from Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm Scott Harrison, Artistic Director of Ironweed Productions, and I want to welcome you to Talking Theater Live. For those of you joining us for the first time, Talking Theater Live is a series of conversations between me and Santa Fe theater artists, sharing stories about their experiences in the theater and the unique paths that led them to creating theater in Santa Fe. I'm very honored and delighted to have as my guest this evening Santa Fe actor and writer Jonathan Richards. Jonathan, welcome and thank you for this.
Thank you, Scott. It's nice to be in this august company.
And we're joined by
Sam, who you can't really see, but
Sam's
he's licking
off
my
camera,
hand.
who's Jonathan's dog, who's licking Jonathan's hand. So Jonathan, just tell you a little bit more about Jonathan. He is an author, journalist, actor, and cartoonist. He has performed frequently on the Santa Fe stage, most recently in The Gin Game, which is a wonderful production with the New Mexico Actors Lab. Also Ever the Twain and Vaudeville. Television credits include Breaking Bad and Manhattan. Film credits include Independence Day Reckoning, Alan Arkin's Blood Thicker Than Water, and narration of the Oscar-nominated short Never Give Up. His latest novel, Nick and Jake, was published by Skyhorse Press. His political cartoons have appeared in the Santa Fe Reporter, the Albuquerque Journal North, and the Huffington Post. Oh, hi, Paul. Paul Blott's joining in. His movie reviews are seen in Posse Tiempo. And in 2012 with Ironweed, he played Mr. Webb in our production of Our Town. So, Jonathan, I always like to start off at the beginning and wanted to ask you your earliest memory as a boy of being captured by the imagination or the world of make-believe.
Well, I think the first thing I can remember performing was at a summer camp production of The House at Pooh Corner, in which I played Eeyore.
Excellent.
I have a vague memory of that, I traveled a lot as a child, so I didn't have access to American culture of movies and theater, and certainly no television at that time. I think my brother and I were pretty much our only continuous companions. He's a year and a half older than I am, so we would play a lot of make-believe games. Just make things up, create worlds, and play characters.
Right.
And that probably is as close as anything to what you're.
The first, yeah. So when you played Eeyore, were you hooked at that point? Or?
I don't think so. I think
took you a while to kind of get.
I don't think I had the faintest idea what was going on. It really was probably in. I went to a boarding school and I got into doing theater there. I was the smallest kid in school. I was when I started, the youngest, and for several years the smallest kid in school. So, as it was a boys' school, I played mostly girls' roles during my theater apprenticeship at boarding school. When I finally got to play in my my sixth form year, I got to play Sir Andrew Aguchi.
Oh.
And I think that was my first male role of my career at school, so that was a breakthrough.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this moment. And in terms of your growing up, because I know you were talking earlier about your mom grew up in Italy?
Yes, she did. And she actually appeared in a few Italian movies. And I don't know much about it because when she would tell us about it, she would dismiss it. Oh, I was just, But we have, since she's been gone, my brother has dug up some stills of which has her as a featured player on the identification at the bottom of the stills. And I can't get, these movies no longer exist, but one of them was an early Vittorio De Sica as one of her co-players. I mean, I'm sure they were small parts, but she rated Barbara Fairbanks at the among the four people identified on this these movie stills. So she must have had a speaking role in it.
Right. Now, did she encourage your interest in?
I think she thought whatever I wanted to do was fine. She didn't really encourage it so much as just say, "Oh, good."
She was supportive of it. Now, and so she met your dad, and then like where did you grow up?
I
know you
grew
moved
up
around.
all around. My father was in the diplomatic service, and they were married in Rome, where she had grown up. But they then moved back to D.C. He was at the State Department for a couple of years while my brother and I were born, and then he was sent to China, and this was during the war.
Mhm.
And then they were divorced fairly soon after that, and with custody arrangement was that my brother and I would be with my mother for 2.5 years, and then with my father for 2.5 years, because he would be in Manila or whatever.
Oh
He couldn't really
gosh.
come for weekends. So lived in Woodstock, New York for the first few. After we left Washington, my mother moved to Woodstock, New York, and she there met and married my stepfather. We were there until it was my father's turn when I was 5, and that was the war had just ended, and he had been assigned to the embassy in Manila. So we went and lived in Manila for a year, and then he was directed to Australia. So we lived in Sydney and went to school there for a couple of years, and then it was my mother's turn again, and she was in Rome at that point. So
Oh
we went and
gosh.
spent a year in Rome, and then I was in Portugal. I was here. So I grew up in a lot of different places until I went to boarding school at the age of 12, and that was in one place for a while.
And that was so the boarding school was.
Boarding school was called South Kent School, not to be confused with the better known Kent School, to which it was to the south. It was
Oh, okay. Yeah.
a small school. I mean, I think my graduating class was about 15 or 20 kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that because I know that's interesting. I mean, my dad was in the military, so I grew up moving around a lot, but we never really moved overseas. It was mainly in the U.S. Did you? I mean, I'm sure it's kind of a mixed thing, but was moving around those places exciting for you as a kid, or was it difficult?
Confusing more than
Yeah.
exciting, I think.
Yeah.
You always felt like you got to. You left a place before the kids had found out about something, and the other place you got to, they already knew about it.
Right.
Whether it was sex or whether
Right.
it was some sort of comic books, or you always felt just a little bit behind the curve.
Yeah, I remember that. I always felt like I just felt like the rules were constantly changing, and then a couple times I moved back to places that we lived, but I felt like they had all
Moved
kind of
on.
moved on, and I was like, wow, I didn't get to take this journey, and I went somewhere else, and I always felt like the rules were shifting on me.
I just wanted to live in a house on the street, where they have little league baseball, and and we just didn't have that. But I think looking back, it probably was very good to get a sense of how big the world was,
Right.
even though I wasn't focused on that. But
Right.
I'm still one of the few people, and I will not do this for the program, but I'm one of the few people who can sing the entire Australian national anthem.
Wow.
Even Pat Oliphant can't do that.
That's great. Oh gosh, that's excellent. Yeah, I've never been to Australia. And it's funny. Yeah, my father was, like I say, he was in the army, but he went to Korea twice. But we didn't go with him because he'd have to stay another year if we did. But well, when in this whole trajectory did you get bit by the theater bug?
Well, I guess it was probably in boarding school. I remember going when I was 10 years old and living back in with my mother and stepfather in Woodstock. That my stepfather had been an actor before then he became a sculptor. But he had left college to become an actor. He went to Bard College, or what the predecessor of Bard College, and then he left after his junior year and became an actor. I believe he played the first Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights in this country.
Oh gosh.
But then he became a sculptor. But when I was 10, the circus came not right to town, but to Poughkeepsie, and the ringmaster was an old acting colleague of Harvey's, who had then gone into the ringmaster line of work. So we got to go down to Poughkeepsie and go to have lunch with the clowns and the acrobats and things. And at that point, I decided I wanted to be a clown, and I think that was probably the first sort of bite of show business that happened. So about 10.
Yeah.
And then going on through boarding school, and then in college I went to Brown University and was involved in theater there, and just wanted to keep going from that.
Right. So, and was it so acting was initially like at Brown, that was what you were drawn
Yeah,
to?
that was what I would. I went to New York, and I worked in advertising, but I took classes at HB Studios with Herbert Berghoff, and that's where I met my wife, Claudia Jessup. Claudia was, she was, preceded me into the class. I came in, they'd already been going for a while, but I came and I sat in the back row because I was too cool to sit in the front, but she was, way ahead of me. I was in the front row, and Berghoff was not a great teacher. He I guess had a sort of a storied career. He was married, he was married to Uta Hagen, and she also, I in retrospect wish I had taken Uta Hagen's class, but I took Berghoff's class, and Berghoff would, it was a 3-hour class, and he'd spend about the first hour and a half or 2 hours talking about all the women he'd seduced in the theater and that sort of thing, and telling all his stories. And then he'd say, "Oh, well, we have about an hour to go. Is there anybody here who has a scene they would like to do?" Yeah. And of course we're all like, yes,
I know, we've been waiting.
Our scene.
I know, please.
And so then you do your scene, and you didn't quite know whether you wanted him to praise you or not, because what you observed was that if the work was pretty mediocre, he would be kind to it. But if it was pretty good, he would rip it to shreds.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
So, you on the one hand, you didn't want to be ripped to shreds, but on the other hand, if he said, yes, that was very good, then you think, oh, shit, what the hell?
Yeah, it was crap. Yeah. He's just... Oh, man. Well, that, do you remember kind of out of college, what your first production that you were involved in?
Well, when I was in New York, Claudia and I both had the same experience. You go to these auditions and you begin to just feel like you were walking through quicksand. I mean, first you go, if you went into a sort of a general call, Claudia remembers getting called for some commercial, some cosmetics commercial or something like that, and walking into a waiting room filled with girls who look just like her, and you begin to wonder if you've got anything, and then you get turned down in enough auditions, and you just, I began to, just to feel that I didn't have what it took to break through in New York. I got a couple of things. I played Dick Whittington in a children's theater, the Caravan Theater production of Dick Whittington and his cat. So I had played the title role, or half of the title role.
Yes, right.
And I did get a walk-on, I think a one-line walk-on in one of the soap operas. I can't remember now which, but I was the maitre d' at a restaurant, and I believe I got to say to whoever the star was, "This way, please, your usual table."
Yes. Right.
And to do that, I had to join AFTRA, which at that time was not the same thing as SAG, and joined AFTRA. And there was a Jonathan Richards already in AFTRA, so I had to come up with another name. My middle name is Fairbanks, which is actually my mother's old family name. We come by it a lot more honestly than the Douglas Fairbanks people, who had to change it from some unpronounceable Polish name to came up with Fairbanks. I thought it sounded classy, So I was Jonathan Fairbanks in AFTRA, and not that it ever did me any good, but I had one old friend who was a Broadway and television person named Woody Bruin, Haywood Hale Bruin. I don't know if the name rings a bell now, but it will with the older people. He had a gig on CBS as a sports announcer, but Woody, when he would take me he just insisted on introducing me as Jonathan Fairbanks, because he said, "If that's going to be your name, you better get used to it."
Yeah.
Cary Grant had to get used to being Cary Grant.
Right.
So that was who I was until we moved out here, and I'd pretty much abandoned ship by the time we moved here. But yeah, he came to Santa Fe, and we moved here in '83. And it was a pretty small theatrical pond here, and it was, all of a sudden I thought, well, I think I could actually play roles I want to play here instead of just desperately hoping I can say this way, sir, to
Yes.
the table.
Yes.
So I started, and I actually started doing theater here a couple of years after we moved here. The headmaster of the school that my older daughter went to was a guy named John Fennell, and he was the headmaster of the Rio Grande school. And he had written a play called The Boy Who Killed Time, and it was a sort of a musical comedy kind of thing. He asked me if I would do a part of it, so I played the part of Uncle Wally, who came on in a pith helmet and shorts, and I think I must have had a song. And then after that, I started, I think the first major thing I did after that was Dr. Dysart in Equus. And there was a story to that, too, because J.D. Garfield played the boy. It was his first role here.
Bernard.
So J.D. and I were in that. And J.D. has to get naked, and then he gets attacked by the horses. He collapses, I guess. And there's at the end of the scene, I have to pick up the naked J.D. and carry him over and lay him on a bench. Well, after the first week of performance, it was a 3-week run, I broke my ankle, and so I broke it after the Sunday matinee, I think. So I had Sunday. They went to the emergency room, and I got a cast and crutches and everything, and I was on the crutches Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. By Wednesday, I was able to graduate to a cane. I know this sort of funny walking shoe kind of thing in the cast. And I went on Thursday for the next 2 weeks, and with the cane and the cast, but there was no question. JD, he was a slim young man, but he was more than I could lift up with a broken leg.
Right.
So we had to change the blocking where I just tossed a blanket over him and left him lying there.
Oh wow, man!
And one of the better compliments I got, Claudia overheard somebody in the lobby coming out after one of the performances saying, "Well, that was very good, but I thought that the bit with the funny shoe and the cast was a bit much."
That's oh gosh, that's the things that we have to. The show must go on.
The show must go on.
Like...
And then the next thing after that was a production of Guys and Dolls.
Oh,
my favorite all-time musical.
Oh, is that right?
And I played Sky Masterson and had to sing "Luck Be a Lady" and trying to find a key that I could range that I could sing it in. But that was. Do you remember Tech Murdoch? He might have been before your time. Tech was a good actor, and he came here from L.A., and I think he was expecting to be playing Sky Masterson, and he got cast as Nathan Detroit. And we had a great relationship, a great time together.
Oh, nice.
I remember him looking at me and saying, "You're going to be playing Sky Masterson?"
This town ain't big enough for the bonus.
Exactly. But in those days, there was a much smaller pool of good actors in town than there is now. It's just really blossomed in the last 10 years, I'd say.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is due to your work. You have just, I don't want to embarrass you, it's your show, but you've done a terrific job with Ironweed, with the work you've selected and the way you've directed it. I think you've really raised the bar.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I definitely agree that, I mean, the wealth of talented people here is really inspiring. I mean, that's we moved here in 2002, and I was just so excited about the seeing shows and then starting to work with people. Just the wealth of creativity and talent in Santa Fe.
But back in the late 80s, when I started doing stuff here. Mostly we worked at the Playhouse. It was about the only theater venue available, And you could pretty much figure, I mean, that in a cast of, let's say, 6 principals, you'd have 2 people who were pretty good,
Yeah.
and 2 people who were okay, and 2 people who really should have bought a ticket.
Yeah.
You know, we did a quite wonderful show. I'd love to do it again or see it done again here sometime. A very good play by Peter Nichols called Passion, and but we just didn't have the cast to pull it off. It was, yeah, a couple of pretty good people, and then some not so good.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting now because it's on and also because the you know the blossoming of theater companies in town. It's like you got to move fast to get, you know, there's talented people here, but
Right,
you got to
but
make sure
they're all spoken for,
everyone's
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. I mean, our mutual friend Robert Benedetti has done, I think, good things for theater in this town. He's another, you know, but they're, you know, Janet Davidson has done good stuff there.
Right.
You know, the Adobe Rose. It's just a whole different scene than it was back when I was young enough to play Sky Masters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you've seen a lot of just evolutions of the theater community in town.
Right, and little companies that come and go, and some great people who we both remember who are no longer around. People like Lois Viscoli. Right. You know, there have always been good people here, but it's, you know, there are enough good people here now that a number of different companies can pull together really good quality theatrical performances, and you know, and that's been a great blessing.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's very exciting. Yeah, speaking of when you mentioned Lois Viscoli, I was thinking today. I was trying to remember when we first met. I think I first met you when for a reading of like a living room reading of the Waverly Gallery, which was like 15 years ago.
I remember that, sure. Yeah.
And Ed Hastings directed it, and Lois was in it. And you and Suzanne Lederer and C.J. Bartlow, I think. Anyway, but I remember because we had just moved here, and we had it at a house on, I think, at Bishop's Lodge Road. Maybe it was, I can't remember whose house it was, but I was coming from Velarde, and I didn't know. I took Bishop's Lodge by way of Taos, and I can't remember. I just kept calling, Ed. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I don't know. I should be getting there, And I was
so
about
at least you had a cell phone. This was the era of cell phones.
Yeah. So fortunately, I was able to call, but I was thinking about that, and I just wanted to kind of ask if you have the same feeling, especially with moving around a lot when you were younger. Because I've never lived in a community as long as I have here. Lisa, my wife, and I've lived here for 16 years, and I've been thinking just about the passage of time. I mean, within a community, but specifically within a theater community, and because we have these experiences where we're storytelling and often making these heightened connections with people. In the plays that we work on, and doing that over time, and kind of growing older really together. I've been thinking about that a lot. I think probably I often go back to thinking about our town, and just how grateful I am for those kind of heightened connections, but also that in a certain sense, I feel like I feel the passage of time more intensely than I might otherwise.
From being in the same place,
and with a theater community where you're working with these people, and we're in a relatively small town, so there's almost kind of an extended family feeling to it.
Well, I think that's right, and for me, this is also the longest I've lived anywhere. We've been here since '83, so 35 years, and. When I came, as I said, I was playing not the juvenile, but certainly the leading man, and now I'm it's the gin game, it's right. The old guy roles, and that certainly is a way of keeping track of the roles you can no longer play or the roles you can now play.
Right. Right.
And you're still in that sweet spot, but wait another 25 to 30 years, Scott. It's gonna,
Better, live it up now. Find those parts that you want to.
You mentioned Ed, who I worked with Lois Viscoli and Karen Lee, in My Old Lady, and that was a great experience. Ed was such a sweet guy. So that was. I did a lot of stuff with Lois over the years. So we did. Lois was great because she just. I mean, this was what her life was about.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she had a clipping service or if she just combed, but she found every part for an actress anywhere between the ages of 55 and 105.
You're right.
And she would call me up and say, "Oh, I found this obscure Tennessee Williams play that you and I did."
Right.
And it was just she was wonderful.
Yeah, and she. I mean, that was her. She was just. It's interesting because she was so. Incredibly talented, but she's also just such a worker. I mean, she just worked and worked and worked at what she did.
And she had to be doing it or she wasn't alive.
You're right. Yeah. And it's interesting, talking about just the passage of time and people that we've, lost over the years. I think there's that sense too, for me, when I'm in different theaters, whether it's the play, like the other day I was in El Museo and I was standing there. We just finished.
That was a wonderful show, by the way.
Oh, thank you. It was
Sam Shepard omnibus that Scott put on.
We really enjoyed that, and it was such a quick thing because we got together and then we suddenly we worked on it that afternoon and then it was done, and I just remember I was standing on the stage that night and. You can kind of remember people in certain places on the stage, and you kind of feel they're in. I go to the Playhouse and I see, Dan Garrity and
you associate certain people. Of course, Dan was in our production of Our Town, as was Karen, and but then at the El Museo, you think of maybe Craig Barnes,
with their productions that they did. Yeah,
and you associate different people with different venues and different places you've worked.
Yeah, that's nice. Do you, when you were talking earlier about those roles, we all age and then certain roles pass us by. Are there particular roles now that you just like,
I wish I'd been able to do?
Or either that or roles that you want that you're just dying to play?
One thing that I've thought about doing, the problem is, I did one-man show here, or it was a semi-one-man show, Barrymore. With Robert Knott in the wings, but I was the only one on stage. There's another one-man show that's always intrigued me. That's Clarence Darrow, and I'm old enough, to probably, and on the verge of going past that. But probably, one-man shows. It's a bear to learn, and two, it doesn't, you don't attract as wide an audience because there's a sort of a rule of thumb, especially in a community-based town like this, a theater, that if you've got, the audience is sort of a geometric progression from how many people you have in the cast. If you've got a cast of 6 people, if they each bring in 10 people in the audience, well, that's, they've got 60 people. But if you've got a cast of 1, there's a lot more on your shoulders. That's a role I'd like to do. I may be doing... as you know, Claudia and I, after 35 years, are moving away. I'm not completely cutting the cord, and I do hope to come back, if I can work it out, next season to do with the New Mexico Actors Lab, to do a play that Nico Ballas is bringing in to do the Pinter play No Man's Land. So that's a part, that I'm looking for, a Ralph Richardson role, that
nice.
I think that sets a good standard for, and I think there are plenty of things like that. I've always thought that Inherit the Wind, I've always thought that I'd like to play the Clarence Darrow part in that. but that's a more difficult play to do here. You could do it because you pulled off Our Town with a cast of 85 or whatever it was. But and that this might fit into your wheelhouse of great American theater. It's a play that has so much relevance to the situation we find ourselves in today. Mm-hmm. It has freedom of the press. It has the separation of church and state. Mm-hmm. It's got it's a relevant play, and it's got some wonderful speeches and lines in it. The two great champions of the character, well, what they called him, Matthew Harrison Brady, who was the William Jennings Bryan character, and Henry Drummond was the Clarence Darrow character, and then there's the newspaper reporter who is more or less based on H.L. Mencken, I think. So that's a terrific play and something I'd like to play. But no, I don't think there's anything that I feel, oh, now I'm old enough to do. I think it's more the other way around. I remember my brother saying to me when I was in my 40s, I trust you've gotten over the delusion that you're still too young to play brick. But that, everybody wanted to play brick, you wanted to do those great Tennessee Williams things. There's so much great American theater and then British theater, English language theater to choose from. Right. We're not going to run out of stuff.
Oh, great! Yeah, and it's always fun to run across those new plays that just oh my gosh, this is an incredible play. Yeah, that's exciting.
I love Tom Stoppard. I would love to do something of Stoppard.
Yeah, that I could see really.
And Arcadia, I think, is one of the most brilliant plays of modern times, but it might be too difficult to do here. You need a set. You need people who can, you can't transpose it into American. It's got to be English. So, but I think Stoppard is the great playwright of our time.
Yeah, he's wonderful.
I was sitting in a one of those little theater area restaurants in New York around 44th Street or something like that. Chloe and I were in there, and the place was fairly empty. And I looked over, and at a table about four tables away, there was nobody in between. There's not many people in the restaurant, and there was Tom Stoppard, and he was sitting alone, and he was writing. And I did not have the guts to get up and go over and disturb him and say, Mr. Stoppard. But I sort of felt, in a way, like I was in the Mermaid Tavern, and there was Shakespeare over there writing. Yeah. And why wouldn't I have gotten up and gone over and say, Mr. Shakespeare, I think you've got a great career ahead of you, and So you look at things like that, and not just the parts you've missed, but the chances you've missed.
Yeah, I've had that happen a few times, and I don't know. I always have that fear that I want to come to the person with some sense of I love theater, and I know, and I always had that fear that I'm going to come and you're like John Gielgud, you were great in Arthur,
Would you autograph my napkin?
Exactly. That I'm just going to come off looking like a buffoon, and so I've done the same. I remember I saw Terry Kinney in New York. I was at a coffee shop, and I love his work at Steppenwolf, and I just I could have just come up and said, I love your work, and I chickened out.
And you know that when people come up on the rare occasions that people come up to us because it's a small town, and you do run into people at Whole Foods and they say, oh, I loved you in the gin game, and you're very pleased. You don't feel like it's an intrusion. It's I mean, you're a little embarrassed and shucks, but it's not an intrusion. I don't know why we are so sure it's going to be an intrusion to Tom Stoppard or to John Gielgud.
That's true. Yeah, and it's interesting in Santa Fe because we do get those celebrity sightings every once in a while too with people in town. Well, Jonathan, I wanted to just ask you one last question. I'm always interested in with theater folks. Is there a particular moment or moments or experiences for you when you're acting on stage where you feel like, this is why I love doing it?
Yeah, I think that there are different characteristics, different levels of that. If you're doing a comedy and you get a big laugh, there's nothing more fun than that. And when you're doing it in a play, as which is what we're pretty much the field we work in, you do it night after night, you do, in this town, generally 12 performances. So you get a chance to calibrate the difference, if I hit it this way,
Yes. Yes.
There are also, as you probably have experienced, there are times when you're on stage when you're just very aware of being on stage and thinking what your next line is and that sort of thing. But there are also times when you just all the vibrations seem together and you're just there as that character doing that thing. And if it's good material, that's a really wonderful feeling. It can also be a very dangerous thing because then you don't remember what your next line is. Right. But it can be a pretty thrilling moment to just have, like a tuning fork, to have it all just, vibrating perfectly.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen all that often, but every once in a while you come off stage and you think, I nailed it.
Yes. That's a great feeling.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, Jonathan, thanks so much for this conversation.
What a pleasure.
Yeah, really fascinating, really inspiring. And I want to thank all of you all for joining us. We will post this on our Ironweed Facebook page, so please like us and follow us on Facebook. Theater Santa Fe is also graciously posting our interviews on their community tab on the theatersantafe.org website, and we'll also announce future interviews on our Ironweed page and also on my Facebook page. So I want to thank you all for joining us. Jonathan, thank you again.
Scott.
And good night, everyone.
Great. Oh, that was fun.
That was really fun, Jonathan. All right, thank you so much. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was.